You don't mind the cold?
Still love it. Not that much.
It gets cold in Delhi in the winter, at nights at least. And here there's central heating in many places in Delhi. You have to sit by a heater, otherwise. That's my impression from Vrindavan primarily.
Yeah, Vrindavan is more cold than Delhi.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, because Delhi has a lot of pollution, so that keeps the temperature.
The blessings of Delhi's pollution.
Yeah.
Somebody told me, this was, I don't know, between 10 and 15 years ago, they did a study that if you walk in Delhi, or if you're driving one of those rickshaws without a mask on, it's the equivalent of inhaling a packet and a half of cigarettes per day. Just moving on the street.
Just yesterday I was reading a news article. It says like people living in Delhi have to pay the price for the pollution by a life of 10 years. It means the life of everyone is reduced by 10 years because of pollution and you get that serious land.
Wow. Just recent.
Just recent.
But they can't meet. They can't control the pollution. 10 years. That's
huge.
what do people do to live longer? I mean, lots of stuff people do to live longer. Beijing is worse. Huh?
I also heard that.
Have you been there?
No.
I have. I was driving in, riding in a car, and it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it looked like it was dusk. And I said, what happened? Does the sun set early here? They said, no, that's smog. And it's not only Beijing. There's miles and miles. You don't mind, I'll just walk. One of the places I visit, she knows, is Hangzhou. So to drive from Shanghai to Hangzhou, there's this long highway, and you look over because over to the right is where the cities are, and over to where we are on the left is where the highway is. And you can't see the building. You can see there's a building, and it's not so far away, but it's just like this long stretch of smog. And even way down there, it's stopping cold.
Today I was attending a lecture by a professor from Yale. So he was
From India?
No, from Yale University.
Which university?
Yale. Yeah, Yale.
Yale, okay.
So what he was telling is we don't talk about climate mitigation anymore, global warming. We now talk about adaptation. We can't stop it anyway. So now how do we adapt to it? So this is the new thing. They don't want to talk about mitigation anymore. Now we talk about how can we adapt it. And
Wear a gas mask.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, and?
I'm Srinivas Prabhu. I'm working in Home Depot.
You're working in Home Depot. Okay. So, 3 Georgia Tech, Emory, Home Depot.
My name is Rishabala Das. I work with State of Church.
We all speak. Well, I was asked what topic would I like to talk about, and I gave a list of several, and I was told, oh, this is a good topic. So if you like the topic, we'll discuss the role of time in Vedas. Interesting topic. Okay. I think where I'll start is those of you that have read the introduction to Bhagavad Gita know that according to Baladev Vidyabhusan, there are 5 primary topics in Bhagavad Gita. If you know these 5, you know Bhagavad Gita. Now, just a little reference. Baladev Vidyabhusan is in our line of Pacific succession, one of the previous acharyas. Prabhupada dedicated his Bhagavad Gita to Baladev Vidyabhusan. And a classic approach for great acharyas is there's a system of knowledge that it's how they see the Vedas, and they're very consistent with it throughout all of their teachings and writings. Without examples and details, it's a standard approach. So this was one of his. Fine. So Ishvara, the Supreme, the living entity, the Jiva, karma, fruit of activity, material nature, prakriti, and this one that's very little talked about in Bhagavad Gita, but one of the 5 topics of Bhagavad Gita is time. One of the 5 essential topics. Not a lot said about it. I'm going to say a little bit more than what is said in Bhagavad Gita, but its importance first of all. In simple summary, time, according to Bhagavad Gita, time destroys all things. All things that are created, they're also destroyed. Time does not destroy that which is eternal, like the soul, but everything else that's created is destroyed by time. It's a destructive force. Time I am the destroyer of all things. Kalos me. It is said the fellow that blew off the first atomic bomb, Oppenheimer was his name, he quoted Bhagavad Gita. Kalos me. Time I am. So somehow he read Bhagavad Gita. Somehow he was familiar with the Vedas. But time not only destroys things, time brings things into being. Time moves matter. Here we are in a house, and a room within the house, and every time I come, the furniture looks a little different. They move things around. And then at some point, there's going to be no room and no house. You go that way in time, you go this way in time, oops, and there was no house. There was something else, and before that it was something else. And time brings things into being, and time destroys things. So here's an important example of how time brings things into being. Then we'll circle around in how time destroys things. There is a very interesting description of the cycles of time. I'm going to make reference to chapter 10 of Canto 3 called Calculation of Time by the Atom. And in that same, that's a section that deals with creation, because you need time to have creation, to bring things into being. So the description goes, and I'll do it a little bit in slow motion. There's periodic creation, maintenance, and then withdrawal of creation and dissolution. For equal duration of time, there's a period of unmanifest. The living entities, the jiva, is within the body of Mahavishnu. Prakriti, material nature, is in a dormant, undifferentiated state. So we have material nature, we have living entities, we have Ishvara, and time is suspended. It's withdrawn. We'll go over it again later. and the person, and Vishnu, two compassionate desires. One, the living entities that are within him, he desires their ultimate happiness. But they're not in the ultimate happiness stage, they're in the dormant stage. He didn't do anything, he just desires it. Icha, Shakti. And Rama Devi, his internal potency, she knows him. She's eternally connected to him. And so she assists him. That's what she does. She assists him in fulfilling his desire. Simultaneous, because time is eternal in that realm, simultaneous, the Mahavishnu sees off in the distance the reflection of Rama Devi. So there's the object and the reflection of the object. The internal potency and the external potency is a reflection of the internal potency. There is a connection. And the external energy wants some service, but she has no service. So with compassion, he wishes for her to have some service. He just desires. And he's glancing at her, this Pradhan. So here's what Ramadevi does. She transfers all the totality of all living entities to the glance of Mahavishnu. So there goes the living entities, along with time, because it's important. Time in the spiritual realm is eternal. So this event that I'm describing is not an event in time, but it's an event. She transforms eternal time into an expansion of eternal time, that is, time as we know it, past, present, or future kind of time. And the time living entities are entrusted to the glance of Mahavishnu, carried by the glance of Mahavishnu, and the original impregnation takes place. The living entities are placed within the womb, or the field of the material energy. You need time, because when the living entities and material nature interact with time, you have those three, then the karma of the living entity, which was dormant, so now we have four things: Ishvara, material nature, living entities, time, and karma. The karma becomes activated because it was deactivated. There's stages and stages that take cycles of time, as described in this 4th canto, chapter 10. A little bit, not in detail. So there's cycles of time, moves in cycles. It's called kala, means time. Kala chakra. Chakra means wheel. Like Sudarshan chakra. Chakra. The top of the temple is a chakra. So the wheel of time turns in small circles or cycles, medium ones, really big ones, but it keeps grinding finely. It brings things into being, develops them for some time, and withdraws them, depending upon the cycle of time. So now we'll go to the time for dissolution. That's like a lot of time. And when it's time for dissolution, it's really simple. If you want to be Mahavishnu, here's what you have to do. You have to have control of time. Time controls us. So he just withdraws time. Or she, Ramadevi, withdraws that time energy, which is one of her self-potencies, and you pull the plug. It's like these things they have in front of houses, Christmas thing, there's a Santa Claus or a snowman or something. You just pump them up with whatever they use. And when when morning comes, they just pull the plug. It just collapses on the ground. So that's what happens to the universe. She withdraws her time energy, and the whole thing, all the elements that went from subtle to gross to more gross to more gross to more gross, and you have all the elements. When time energy is withdrawn, the more gross collapse into the subtle, collapse into the more subtle, collapse into the more subtle, back to the pradhan state. The living entities are again withdrawn into the body of Mahavishnu. The time energy that was past, present, and future is now situated again under the control of Ramadevi as eternal time. And there's an equal resting period. And then another creation, big cycle of time, and a resting period. That's the Vedic picture of, say, the role of time in creation and dissolution. So what is time anyway? It's so important. It's on the one hand and on the other hand. On the one hand, time is of a spiritual dimension, and therefore is none different than Krishna. Therefore, time, I am. They're identical. On the other hand, time is an energy. The energy is not the energetic. The energy is an energy, and the energetic is the energetic. They're inseparable. Therefore, time, I am. But time is an energy under the direction of eternal time. Time as we know it, past, present, and future, is a subset of eternal time. So really, time is eternal. But we've lost contact with time as eternal because we're identifying with this temporary manifestation, asat. Sat, eternal. Asat, temporary. We're identifying with asat. So we're out of touch with sat. We lost our best friend. Try to find some other friend in the realm of asat. In this fourth canto description, time is an energy, and there's measures of time. Normally, we would think, okay, it's a few minutes before 8 o'clock. That's what time it is. And that's the time in Atlanta. And the time in Delhi is something else. The time in China is something else. And the time in some place is something else. Based upon the movements of the sun. According to the Bhagavatam, there's small cycles of time, then put clusters of those together, you get another unit of time, more clusters together. Just like we often speak about Muhurta, Brahma Muhurta, not too often, but somebody asked at the first university program, why is it that all over ISKCON you start the programs at 4:30? Is there something like special about 4:30? And I said, there's different ways of answering that, but one of them is, commonly, depends where you are, latitude and time of year, sun rises around 6 o'clock. And one Muhurta before the rising of the sun is Brahma Muhurta, and is 1 hour 36 minutes before the rising of the sun. 4:30. Ideal. So we rise and we take part in spiritual activity that's ideally performed, maximum spiritual potency. There's different explanations, from Ayurvedic explanation and otherwise. Best time for spiritual activity. From muhurta. So muhurta is just a measure of time. But there's smaller units and there's bigger units. So many muhurtas make a day. You keep breaking muhurtas down, and down and down and down. The smallest unit of time, according to the Bhagavatam, is the time it takes for the sun to cross one atom. It's pretty small. The Sanskrit term for one atom is parama anu. Anu means small, Vibhu means big, Vishnu is Vibhu and we're Anu. It's qualitatively same, but Vibhu and Anu. Unlimitedly big and very, very tiny. So parama anu in this case means the smallest indivisible particle of matter. And of the doctrines that try to explain Vedanta Sutra, one of them is by Kanada, and it's known as the atomic theory. And his theory is all there is matter. Sounds like mechanistic science. All there is matter, and the laws that govern matter. That's existence. There isn't anything else. But very, very meticulously covering this topic that I'm just kind of glossing over, really meticulously. But modern science says a sense of atom. No, atoms have particles, this and that and the other. And they're finding more ones that are parts of an atom. But the smallest indivisible unit of matter is the atom. Whatever that is, that's what an atom is. The smallest indivisible particle of matter. Bhagavatam says that. And the sun moves. The sun moves on its chakra, on its cycle or wheel. And the sun moving over one atom is the smallest unit of time. So many of those make another, and so many of those make another, and so many of those make another, and so many makes a fraction of a second, Nimesha. Then you get minutes, and then you get muhurtas. Keeps different Sanskrit terms till you get a day, and then you get a night, and then so there's so many days and so many nights makes a year, and then so many years makes so etc. The cycles get bigger and bigger, and it's just movements of time moving matter. I wanted to read three things that I found might be an eye-opener, as you say in India. Prabhupada doesn't quote Albert Einstein, he's quoting the Bhagavatam, saying time and space are two co-relative terms. Time-space continuum. Now, I don't know so much about it, but I know one who knew a lot about it, Sariputta. The whole of Samkhya, that's later in this third canto, is a description of the time-space continuum, according to Sariputta. He has this PhD or postdoc level discussion about time-space continuum and how that corresponds with Sankhya, or Sankhya corresponds with that, or however you want to say it. Of course, Einstein is more modern, and the Vedas are more ancient, but it doesn't mean wisdom has to be ancient to be real, has to be modern to be real. It has to come from Einstein to be real. The Vedas speak of time and space being co-relative. That's what they wanted to make. I can read the first word. Well, atomic time is measured according to is covering a particular atomic space. That time which covers the unmanifested aggregate of atoms is called the great time. So there's Parama Anu, and then there's Mahat Parama Kala. Then here's another, he doesn't explain it, he just drops a bomb and says, the atom is the minute, subtle form of eternal time. That's in a previous purport. And it connects with time and space are co-relative terms. He doesn't explain it, he doesn't go into the physics of it or the mechanics of it, the technology of it. He's just stating the principle, which, if you go back to that description that I gave about Mahavishnu's glance, there go the living entities and time energy, and over there is Prakriti. But Prakriti is undifferentiated matter. The totality of matter, but there's no, not even like a big jumbled warehouse. It's just undifferentiated altogether. There's an undifferentiated warehouse, you go in and then separate things out. But it's undifferentiated. But by contact with time and the living entities, matter starts to differentiate out. Over here, first thing, our dear friend false ego. Hey, false ego. What will we do without it? And then false ego mixes with the modes of nature because they were dormant in the absence of time and now they're active. False ego mixes with the mode of goodness and produces or separates out the mind. False ego mixes with the mode of passion and separates out material intelligence. False ego mixes with the mode of ignorance and separates out the five material ingredients. We don't have space yet. We just have time and the elements of material nature. But space is correlative with time. Say negatively. Withdraw time, you don't have space. You just have pradhan, you just have undifferentiated glob, or totality of material energy. So to have space, it's between this and that. You don't have that differentiation without time. You don't have a wall without time. It takes time to make the wall. It takes time to destroy the wall. Even if you want to blow it up, it still takes time to blow it up. Time is needed. They're destructive forces and they're creative forces. But they all require time. Time and space are co-relative terms. Exactly how they interact, etc., is not, the technology isn't here. It's a subject for research. And another point is the mechanistic conception that you don't need God, you don't need an Ishvara. All you need is one thing. Matter and the laws governing. They don't talk about time. Just matter and the laws governing matter. That's it. That's everything. Everything's been explained in those terms. Period. Or exclamation point. Don't say anything else. You don't entertain anything else here in this university, or this department of study, or this view of the world. It's popular because technology is a very simple, maybe oversimplified explanation of technology. It's just understanding the cause and effect of material nature. You move this over here, and that over there moves. This is connected with that. That's research. And then so I have now a job because I know how to move this to get that to move. Maybe I can learn how to get it easier to move or move this, and 3 other things also move. I just didn't notice it before because I didn't do my research. And now we have industry resting upon technology, resting upon the laws of nature that govern matter. And that's all there is. Then one other reference about time. Eternal time is never lost along with the life of the creation. It continues, but it has no ability to control the Supreme, because the Supreme is the controller of time. In the spiritual world, there is undoubtedly time, but it has no control over activities. Prabhupada had this very interesting phrase. He said, in the spiritual world, time is conspicuous by its absence. Have you heard that one before? Time is conspicuous by its absence. Now, that means time as we know it, but there is eternal time. Time, go back, time is measured by the movement of the sun over an atom, or however many atoms. So you can have one atom, and it's really small unit of time. You can have a lot of atoms. You can have a universe. It's made of so many atoms. And that's this Mahad time, Mahad Kala. So it depends on how many atoms. That's time and space. And so many atoms. So our measure of time, the measure of time in the lower planetary systems, the middle planetary systems, and the upper planetary systems is different. And then there's eternal time. So just do that for a bit. Mind expanding, just thinking about the topic of time. Most of you know, probably, of Balaram. Krishna, of course, his first wife was Rukmini. But even before Krishna married Rukmini, Lord Balaram married. You know who Balaram married? Revati. Yeah? And Revati was the daughter of King Kukudni. King Kukudni recognized this person, my daughter, is very special. He wanted Lord Brahma to make an arrangement. He wanted Lord Brahma to make an arrangement for a marriage, maybe a matchmaker. So he went to Brahmaloka. Brahma was busy with some Vedic recitation, and then Brahma came, and Kukudni said, please, can you help me find a qualified husband for my super qualified daughter? And Brahma laughed and said, don't you realize time here is different than time there? And so many cycles of the yugas have passed. When you go back, they won't even recognize you, and you won't recognize anybody. So much time has kingdoms have come and gone. But there's a qualified person, Balaram, your daughter can marry Balaram. Basically tell him Brahma said so. So when he went back, didn't recognize anything, nobody recognized him because so much time had passed in earthly time. And when the invitation was made for Balaram to marry Revati, she was very tall. So it said, with his plow, he placed his plow on the shoulder and brought her to his size. And that was just another example of this is, some of you may know this from Jagannath, because I was just in Jagannath Puri conducting the yatra there. And there's this very lengthy description of the appearance of Lord Jagannath having to do with a king of Avanti named Indradumna, and Indradumna's journey to find Nila Madhava, the Lord of the Universe. When he gets there, the deity's gone under a sandstorm. And so many things happen. Jagannath is carved, and it was told by Narada that Brahma would install the deity of Lord Jagannath. So Narada said, "You go see Lord Brahma." And Indradumna said, "Can I go with you?" So they went together. And the time that it took to get there, and again he was involved in some Vedic recitation. So many, practically one, forget the duration of time. The remaining portion of the life of Manu, maybe it was one of the Yuga cycles. In any case, earthly time, so much time had passed, because time is relative. Time in Brahmaloka is greater than that of time in heaven, which is greater than that of earth time, which is greater than that of the lower planetary systems. It works the other way, the lower planetary systems. Like, even before lower planetary systems, the life cycle of some insects, their 100 years is a day or two. They do everything. Just as we do everything in 100 years, and our 100 or so, our 6 months of our time, Prabhupada would say this over and over, it's one day in the heavenly planets, and the night in the heavenly planets is another 6 months. So 1 year of our solar year is one day on the heavenly planets, and it's a moment on the Brahmaloka. And then there's planets in between, which are described in this 3rd canto, chapter 10. But time is relative. Our experience of time is relative. The movements, the cycles of time is relative. And a function of those cycles of time is consciousness. More covered consciousness, less covered consciousness, pure consciousness. Time acts differently upon us according to consciousness. And I'll throw a little challenge for all of you. Many people, Prabhupada writes this in Sri Ishopanishad, many people say, "Oh, I don't have time. I have so much to do, I'm so busy, I don't have time." Because of their consciousness. So material nature responds according to consciousness. So if someone is ignoring Krishna, then they're given fruitive activities that keep them so busy they literally don't have time. And someone whose consciousness turns toward Krishna, there's time. You have to use time more carefully than when you're not conscious or mindful or Krishna conscious specifically. But one who is mindful, it's like you don't move in slow motion. You use time very carefully because you're present in the moment with every moment of time. And you can do so many more things more effectively. And the time energy moves differently in your life. Time moves matter. Matter affects consciousness when we identify with it. But when our consciousness identifies with eternal, time moves differently. We're brought closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to eternal time. That's the bhakti process. It brings one into this realm of eternal time. So even we're moving about, and we're going to get old and die. So time doesn't stop destroying things, but it acts differently. It can give us access into the eternal realm as the temporary is being destroyed by temporary time. unless a devotee who Prabhupada valued very much for his deep study of Srimad Bhagavatam from the perspective of a scientist. His name is Sadaputta Richard Thompson, who wrote several books. In the 70s, he's a PhD graduate in math from Cornell. Didn't have, especially a science background. But he's, in my experience of this lifetime, he's the closest person to a genius I've interacted with personally. And Prabhupada gave him the assignment of studying the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam and making a design for a planetarium depicting the structure of the universe, cosmology. And one of the last subjects that he worked on, along with he created a plan, which they're largely using for the Vedic planetarium. His last subject he was interested in writing books about and trying to explain is time. And because I've been busy doing other things, I've been investing my time in other things, I haven't gone into that, his writing, but it's recorded, the classes and seminars and things, and PowerPoint presentation. I saw one of them, I couldn't follow it, because it's like abstract, it's really up there. But I'm sure he's got his hand on some of the key mysteries of the deeper understanding of the time-space continuum and how everything here moves and how everything in the spiritual world works with eternal time. There's a correlation between that. Eternal time and time as we know it. And space as we know it, and the eternal spiritual realm, which is without limit. I don't know if that's what you were expecting on the topic of the role of time, but you're an educated person, so I thought spin out a little bit on the topic of time. Yeah.
All right. I know I walked in a little late. I just wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on the factor of spiritual time in the spiritual world, how it works.
Well, sure.
If you could break it down a little bit.
Okay. In Bhagavad Gita, there's a few things. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, there is a place where there's no need of sunlight, moonlight, electricity. Correct? Bhagavad Gita? You don't know? Okay. It's in Bhagavad Gita. There's no need of sun. That's the spiritual world. There is this world that's dark, literally, without the sun and luminaries in the universe. It's a place of darkness. Luminaries bring light. Light goes out, it's dark. It's a place of darkness, literally and figuratively. The spiritual world, literally and figuratively, is a place of light. Although there's no need of sunlight, moonlight, electricity in the spiritual world, there's a sun, there's a moon, and I don't know anything about electricity in the spiritual world. I'm making this point because Jiva Goswami explains that spiritual time, there's no past, present, and future, because it's eternal. Because it's Krishna's internal potency, there's the sense of time. There's morning, the sun rises. There's no need of, because everything is self-luminous, but for Krishna's pastime purposes, the sun sets. And after the sun sets, here comes the moon. But it's a full moon, because it's for the purpose of Krishna's pastimes. It inspires emotion, the full moon. A whole other description of the function of the moon in this world. And this is just a reflection of the moon in the spiritual world. So there's sunlight, there's full moon night, there's day and there's night, and there's the sense of passage of time, like separation. Krishna goes to the forest or to the pasturing ground with his friends. He leaves Vrindavan, and the residents of Vrindavan are feeling separation because he's gone. No separation. There's no time. But there's the sense of time, so that there's the sense of events. So how do you have events that are eternal? Because we only know events that are within time, as we know it. Like, here we are. Before we were somewhere else, and then we're going to be somewhere else through passage of time. So how does time work in the spiritual realm? It's eternal. Nitya Liva, eternal pastimes. It says they're eternally going on. It seems like, chaos. Everything's eternally going on. But there's this potency, internal potency, that allows for the sense of passage of time, and thus differentiation between one activity and the next activity, like meeting and separation, for example. It's all to enhance the pleasure of Krishna's devotees and Krishna. Time moves Krishna's pleasure and the pleasure of Krishna's devotees. Very flexible. Inconceivably flexible. Like, here's an example. This is something the Prabhupada was asked. Krishna would travel every day throughout Vrindavan with the caste. And he would go way over here and way over there, like the Kaliya Leela. Have you been to Vrindavan? No? Yes. Have you been to Vrindavan? May you all one day go to Vrindavan. And when you go to Vrindavan, I'm sure you'll see the temples in the downtown Vrindavan area. In between the downtown Vrindavan area and the Krishna Balaram temple, it's a short walk. It's 15, 20-minute walk. Halfway between is where the Kaliya Leela took place. Kaliya Leela is Krishna's dancing on the hoods of the serpent. When Krishna arrived at that place, the Kaliya lake, and saw the cowherd boys as if dead because they drank water from the Kaliya lake, and the cows as if dead because they drank water from the poisonous Kaliya lake, this whole scene evolved, the pastime. When Krishna was in the coils of the Kaliya serpent, the devotees went all the way to Nandagram, and Nanda Maharaj came and this event is from Nandagram to the Kaliya lake, which is early in the morning. Just take a taxi from Kaliya Ghat to where Krishna lived. It can take easily over an hour and a half. So they just were walking. So how did he get from this place to that place, and back again? No car, no taxi, no helicopter. How they move from this place to that place so quickly? Devotees asked Prabhupada, not specifically necessarily Kaliya, but all over Vrindavan and walking around Govardhan Hill. So how did he manage to do this? Time. This is time in the spiritual realm, which is your question. And Prabhupada's answer was very clever. He said, Vrindavan is like a lotus. Sometimes the petals are open, sometimes the petals are closed. When the petals are close, the distance becomes shorter. So to go from point A to point B when the distance is shorter is easier. That was his answer. But time and space are quite flexible in the spiritual realm. The flexibility factor is the internal potency, or Yogamaya potency. She organizes Krishna's pastimes custom-made. So time doesn't create an obstacle. Although it may appear to create an obstacle when Krishna's gone for the day and the residents of Vrindavan are feeling separation from him. It's to enhance the mood of love. Time moves in that way. But for Krishna's pleasure, it can be a non-obstacle, a non-factor. Instantly he can just, he's somewhere. Didn't have to walk to get there. He just did. For sake of pastimes. Now, for a materialist, that's mumbo jumbo. And for a spiritualist, my Krishna is very wonderful. His unlimited potency. Parasya Shaktir Vedadaiva Shrumite. That's what the Vedas say. The Shruti mantras say. He has unlimited potency. So if he has unlimited potency, on the negative side, what is it that he can't do? If you say he can't do, then he doesn't have unlimited potency. He doesn't have unlimited potency, he's like us. Maybe a better version, but like us. And then we can become him, because you just have to do a little self-improvement. Become him. Or as good as him, at least. Not so. He has unlimited potencies. Time is one of them. And time moves according to that which will enhance his pleasure and the pleasure of his devotees. And the pleasure of the devotees and Krishna sometimes is creating of an obstacle. Because if it's all tablamized, it's not as fun, not as enjoyable as if there's an obstacle and you work through the obstacle. And it's just part of it's part of everything that is. Everything that is in the spiritual world, including the appearance of obstacles, but there's really no obstacles. It's just Krishna's pleasure. Varieties of pleasure. Fully under his control. And time is one of the factors through which he controls. And how does that touch our lives? The bhakti process is also co-eternal. Now we may not see it that way or understand it that way, but it is. And we're being connected with the eternal through the medium of bhakti. Now, the limitation is our own consciousness, too much identification with matter. Inordinate identification with matter. We have to deal with it, but it's not us. So if we identify with it and think it's us, then we're that much further away from pure bhakti and eternal time. We have to purify ourselves and become more qualified. You want to add anything to that?
I was just taking notes, so I didn't think of a question. And
Okay.
I'll ask them.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify, you were saying that false ego comes from matter?
No. There is pradhan. Pradhan means undifferentiated totality of matter. And of that undifferentiated totality of matter, there's 24 elements that separate out slowly, or one by one. False ego is the first one that separates out. It's part of the material energy in its undifferentiated, unmanifest state.
little bit more elaboration, Marge, on differentiated.
I didn't understand. If it's coming from matter,
Yes,
it's not
It-
matter.
it is matter. False ego is matter. It's a division of matter. Right? There's 8. Bina prakritir ashtada. Bhumirapam lobhayukam mano buddha evacha ahankara. Ityame. Bina prakritir ashtada. Ahankara, false ego. It's one of the 8 main material elements. That 8, that's described chapter 7. Chapter 13 gives a list of 24. It's just a different model. And false ego is in that list of 24. It's a material energy. It's of the material energy. It is a material energy. You're perplexed still.
No,
What's the problem?
so if it is coming from material energy,
It's not from the material energy. It is
it is.
it is one of the material elements. Okay, here's a pie. There's some crust, and there's a cherry, and there's an apple, and there's some syrup, and there's all elements that make the pie. Part of the pie. It's part of material nature. Not from. It is part of.
And but time in the material world, that is not from material nature.
That it's a separate entity. It's Bhaktisiddhanta's separate thing. It's time is not Prakriti. Prakriti is not time. They're separate. The jiva is not Prakriti. They're separate. Time and Prakriti are separate. False ego is one of the Prakriti elements, and time is a separate energy, Kala Shakti.
And so that's why there's no way by using our own desire so that we can control time.
Of course, there is already control over time. How you can, that's presumptuous. I want to be Ishvara. That's the material problem. I want to be Ishvara. Krishna controls time. It's his time. It's energy. He does through his expansions, but it's his energy. Therefore, time I am. You want to control time? Good luck. You use time. Ideally, you use time in serving the source of time. Serving Krishna. Different ways, according to our nature. But if I ignore who's in control of time, I try to control time, and time controls me.
Maharaj, my confusion is when devotees desire to do service, what are they are using aren't they using their mind and intelligence to do that?
Yeah.
But mind and intelligence are material, and time is.
Well, mind and intelligence behind the material is spiritual. You follow? Here's a glove, and the glove just sits there. But you put your fingers in the glove and wiggle your fingers, and the glove wiggles. The glove doesn't wiggle without your fingers wiggling. Mind and intelligence don't move without the spirit soul animating the mind and intelligence. And there's a pure state of mind and a pure state of intelligence that is who we are, is part of who we are. But when we misidentify who we are with who we're not, then we have this covering, the material covering, mind and intelligence. It's all resting on spirit. Remove spirit, the plane collapses. So now back, the devotee wants to do service. We use the mind. We use intelligence, we use the body, we use instruments, extensions of the senses. we use, it's a frying pan, fire. We use the energy in service to Krishna. But behind it all, there's spirit. And if we're not conscious of doing this for Krishna, it's just matter interacting with matter, and the soul is going along for the ride. Yantra Rudhani Maya, the machine of the material energy is moving, and the living entity is the passenger. And it's the ride of the material energy. The material energy is doing things. The living entity is going along for the ride. But when we become Krishna conscious, we're utilizing these things in Krishna's service, and it becomes spiritualized. The mind, the intelligence, the senses become spiritualized. They act in a spiritual way, all resting upon consciousness. You look a little less perplexed, but you still look perplexed. So maybe we'll just go on to another question.
I actually have another one.
You have another one.
So this is more like, so when we look at other people and we're trying to do preaching to them, and many times so much effort, so much time has gone into cultivating those people, but those people will not want to do japa or meditation.
Okay.
So we're trying to use time to make them also subservient to time, but we are not unable to control it.
Well, you're not the doer. Just for starters, don't see yourself as the cause of action. Bhagavad Gita. You can be an instrument of Krishna, but don't think of yourself as the cause of action, nor creating a result from your action. That's a no-no in Bhagavad Gita. The kartripam the kamani lokasya sujite prabhu. Never think of yourself as the performer of activity, the cause of the result of activity. Don't think that way. Being carried out by material nature. You're an instrument. So get your false ego out of the way, pardon me, and the best you can do is be Krishna's transparent instrument. Let him do it. You be the instrument, and whether it is successful or not successful, that's between that living entity and Krishna. Right now, you're not a sharp instrument, a dull instrument. Say same thing differently. If the same person, the same time, same place, and it was Prabhupada interacting with that person, compared to you, would the result be the same or different? Because purity of consciousness, the effectiveness of the instrument in the hand of Krishna. So what you need to work on is purity and transparency, being an effective instrument, a pure, conscious, no, I'm the doer, I'm trying to do this to that, with or to that person. Service as a representative of Krishna, that's all. Whatever, and it's not just, it's anything, cooking, cleaning, doing your academic work, do it for Krishna. That's the consciousness to cultivate. And the results up to Krishna. In your academic work, in your teaching work, in your cooking, and everything. Up to Krishna. Just be his instrument. Nimitta matram bhavya savyasacham, Krishna says. Arjuna, become my instrument. Same thing to you. Become Krishna's instrument. With the false ego, very similar. Yeah.
Maharaj, you explained that like the relativity of time and different planets is basically has to do with the consciousness of the living entity.
Yes.
The more pure the consciousness, the
Yes.
slower the time.
Yes.
So just trying to understand that like is the time as an entity moving with the same speed? It's only to do with the consciousness, or like the time also changes in some way, like in different planets or maybe in different species.
Well, you go to this planet or that planet because of consciousness. A body is awarded a destination when the soul leaves the body. Where you go, this planet, that planet, has to do with consciousness. Or you could say it differently. You can say guna and karma. But what drives guna and karma is consciousness.
So it's all to do with the consciousness.
Yeah. Everything rests on consciousness. That's the soul. And the soul can be more covered, less covered. Consciousness-wise, modes of nature-wise, karma-wise, self-discovery-wise.
Can we understand it like this? So like time is also a covering on the soul.
Time is also what?
A covering on the soul.
A covering. Well, it's moving matter, that much for sure. So it's not time per se is not a covering. Time is awarded to us according to our consciousness, yes. And time is restricted according to consciousness. Our lifespan could be 24 hours. Our lifespan could be millions of years on that, higher planets. Higher consciousness, lower consciousness. So it's expanding and contracting. Time is expanding and contracting depending upon consciousness. So it's a constricting factor. Normally it's described that guna and karma, Bhagavad Gita, guna and karma are the forces acting on the conditioned soul. And bhakti brings us into this realm of eternal time. So in that way, guna and karma become diminished or dissolved through the bhakti process. Consciousness then becomes less covered, more illumined, more bright, and closer to eternal time. The realm of eternal time. The realm of, in China I call it the realm of higher consciousness. You just, use these pavlovized words. It's easier for people.
I was just wondering, like we read in the Shastras, like there are different kinds of siddhis and like which yogis use to control the different material nature.
Yes.
So like is like just wondering like is like do yogis also control time by something like that?
No. Here's what Prabhupada explains. It's very simple. It's in Nectar Devotion. The mystic siddhis have a mechanistic approach. Mechanistic people try to do the same thing that mystic people do. One is just subtle manipulation of laws. Another is less subtle, more gross manipulation of laws of nature. That's all mystic power. It's not controlling time.
Time is beyond the reach of any living.
Yes.
The question came into my mind because like people have been talking about time travel like nowadays, but earlier they were doing a lot of research in time travel, so it's not possible as per the Shastras.
Well, time can move, open and close by Krishna's arrangement. So if a mystic, to have mystic powers, let's just say time travel. To have a power you can travel from, like the mystic city, here's an easy one. A little more easy. Prapti Siddhi. Prabhupada told the story. I heard it a couple of times. His father used to invite different sadhus. One of them, who would come from time to time, had mystic cities. So he was sitting in the living room with a number of people, and someone said, "Please say something that you would like." So someone said, "I'd like a pomegranate from Afghanistan." Boop, and the pomegranate from Afghanistan. Prabhupada said, I was sitting in the, very close in front, and I saw the sap dripping from the stem of the pomegranate from Afghanistan. He actually had, time and space were moved by subtle law. Not that he controlled time. He knew how to manipulate the material elements in such a way he could do practicity. That the rest of us don't know how to manipulate. It's like, I remember someone told me what a fax machine was. And I thought they were teasing me. No. But yes. But it's just technology. It's, manipulating laws of nature. If you do it in a mechanical, we can do it in a subtle. It's just laws of nature. Time doesn't change, but you can. So time travel similarly. It's just subtle. It's material, not spiritual. Okay?
One more question.
Yeah, one more. That was a good one.
So, as Jyoti asked, the fourth ego is coming from matter. So, I was just trying to understand, there's a fourth ego that I am the controller, I am the proprietor.
Yes.
And then there's a true ego that I am the servant of the servant of the servant.
That's spiritual.
Yes.
That's spiritual ego.
Okay, so that spiritual ego is that also conversion of matter?
No, it's of the soul.
It's of the soul.
That's the fingers that move the glove.
So that's the nature of this soul.
Yes. Yes. It has identity, it has a self-identity. And not abstract, but in connection with the source of all souls. And there's a mood. That's connection of service is with humility. Humble mood of service is a short way of saying. And that's of the soul. It's a spiritual conception of self. It's who we are. The goal is not to get a dagger and kill the self. Then you're liberated. There is an identity of the self. There is a true ego. That's the true ego. Spiritual. Not material. Not false ego. The spiritual conception of self.
Is it okay to?
You got to turn the volume up.
Is it okay to spend time on spiritual progress, like Krishna consciousness, and on material progress at the same time, or is it we have to spend time on our Krishna consciousness so that our material things can be taken care of?
Well, the idea is to spiritualize everything. And then this distinction between spiritual and material becomes rhetorical, becomes insignificant. You live your life in a spiritual way. So let's just take career. Develop your career for Krishna. Study. Do your studies in such a way, it's a different consciousness than I make this distinction. Over here is the material and over there is the spiritual. Let me do this for Krishna. That's spiritualizing the activity. I've used this example already. Cooking. You can cook for Krishna, you can cook for myself, and then I do my spiritual activity. It's part of your spiritual activity. Cooking for Krishna. So it's not simultaneously developing both. It's spiritualizing on the strength of the spiritual core. You spiritualize your entire life. Everything. A to Z. How to do that? That's the art of work. but the understanding how to, in principle, is in Bhagavad Gita. Yat karoshi, yat asnasi, yat shahosi, tatasi, yat, from Bhagavad Gita. Whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever charity, whatever austerity, whatever sacrifice, whatever you do it for Krishna. Madarpana, arpana. It's just, do it as a form of worship of Krishna. Then you don't have to do this thing. It's one thing. Holistic life. Everything for Krishna. And the part of everything for Krishna is your daily sadhana. That's the core. And then all the other things that you do, your bathing, and your working, and your eating, and your recreation, and your social, everything you do. The core consciousness is for Krishna. It rests upon consciousness. It rests upon having nice sadhana, which polishes and invigorates spiritual consciousness. Right? Again, it's easy to say. There's no thing to live by it, but that's the principle. Anything? Anita?
You mentioned life expectancy is averaging about 100 years. How does that human 100 years, what is the source of that?
What's the source of that? Right in the Bhagavatam?
That human beings live 100 years?
Well, it's in the chapter. Now, in different yugas, the life duration becomes by a factor of 0. It can be a factor of 10. Add a 0. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Then back again to 1, no. So, time moves differently in the different yugas within one yuga cycle. But the 100 years of Brahma has a big cycle. The first half and the second half. So, cycles, from the very beginning, time moves in cycles, and there's really, really tiny ones, and there's medium ones, and there's big ones. So the life duration of 100 years is, in one sense, it's figurative, or it's particularly appropriate because this was written at the beginning of Kali Yuga, at the end of Dwarka Yuga. So it's for us Kali Yuga folks. But it doesn't discount that there's other yugas and other durations of life.
That's for all the species in this world.
Yes, but but the lifetime of an insect may be 24 hours, and in those 24 hours, birth, death, disease, and old age.
So it's 100 years, 100.
That's their 100 years. 24 hours. Just like our 100 years is something different than on the heavenly planets.
And then when we say that the Kali Yuga we expedited, where we don't live 100 years, an average life expectancy
Yes,
is
diminishes, correct. But just like, what's the duration of, the average duration in Dwarpa Yuga, Treta Yuga, is 10,000 years. How long did Dasarath rule? Dasarath, the father of Ram. 60,000 years. And so it's at the end of Satya Yuga and the beginning of Dwarpa Yuga. Excuse me, Treta Yuga. So he ruled for a long time. But not 10,000, it was 60,000. So it happens incrementally, It's a number, and it's bigger on this end and smaller on that end. You follow?
Yes.
Okay.
In terms of, like when I remember reading Srimad Bhagavatam, not recently, talking about the age of Mother Yashoda when she had Krishna.
Yeah.
I've read somewhere it says 100 and something, 100 plus years, and talks about her old age. And when we look at it from a material perspective, we're talking about old age, 100 something years. I understand you just explained this spiritual time, the sense of spiritual time. Why that huge differentiation, first of all?
Which one?
Mother Yashoda's age in terms of giving birth to Krishna. Regardless of if it says, they're not having children, so they're getting old, and then Krishna came into their lives in the old age.
I'm not sure what your question is. Are you?
Mother Yashoda's age
What about it?
was something about 100 or so years.
So, therefore, what's the question?
From when we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, is it talking about the spiritual realm or the Martya, the Leelas in the material planet? The Bhagavatam.
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking. I'm sorry, but Mother Yashoda can do whatever Krishna wants her to do. That's the Leela part. And then from the materials part, she's getting old. But it's a previous yuga, or toward the end of a previous yuga. So how long do people live towards the end of the previous yuga? I don't have the answer to that. But maybe our 120 years is not the same as at the end of Dwarka Yuga. Biologically for a woman and being able to have a child and so forth. So that's from the material perspective. The duration of time, acting, but how did the conception take place? The mind of, at least from Vasudeva Devaki, mind to mind, not the other kind of conception. Doesn't give that same description of Nanda and Jasoda and how that transpired, but a spiritual event regardless of their age. However, and to accommodate the age of Mother Jasoda, how did a woman of such an age conceive a child anyways? From a material point of view. The only thing I can think, because I've not heard this in 120 years, this is the first I've heard.
109 years.
Huh?
109 years or so.
Whatever the number is, I've never heard it. Garga Samhita, I never heard it. But it's not, for me, it's not a problem. It's just, it's the end of Dwarka Yuga, and she had a son. Her duration of life was not the same as the Kali Yuga duration of life. The same Kali Yuga 109 years. Different, because time moves differently in different yugas. Yeah.
Maharaj, I was just trying to understand the conception of time of the life period in different yugas. Can you understand this in terms of consciousness as well?
Can you do what?
Understand this change in the life in terms of consciousness?
Of course.
The consciousness was most developed so that.
Yes. Yes. Here's something interesting. 100,000, 10,000, 1,100, and it goes down to like rock bottom. If someone lives to be 20, they're considered a ripe old man. And then it goes right back to Satya Yuga. So how does that work? You thought of that one? It's something like a whirlpool. You put something on the outer perimeter of a whirlpool, it goes around and around, and it starts going faster and faster, and down, 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 gone. So how do you go back up again? That's Kalki. He annihilates everything. You know, the karma of the living entities totally dissolved. Living entities from a higher dimension of space, Vyasadeva, where Madhvacharya went to find in higher dimension space, where he and others are residing, descend from that higher dimension to this dimension, and Satyuga starts. $100,000 years. It's a big jump.
Another question in relation to this, like you said, after the time cycle, there is a dormant period when the time is absent, and after that it starts again.
The time is withdrawn.
The time is withdrawn. So just was wondering, like the karma of a living entity, does that for a living entity, does that end with the dissolution?
No. It's held in abeyance. It's temporarily, is it word of time, it's suspended. Karma is suspended.
So when he returns back to the Satya Yuga, like he is born with the same karma or like.
Yeah. Right where they left off. Just like, Prabhupada gives the example of sleep, but even more dramatic is anesthesia. During anesthesia, you're closer to time not functioning, without the detail. There's no sense of, when you're dreaming, there's a sense of passage of time. When you're under anesthesia, there's no sense of passage of time. It's a very different experience. But when you come out of the anesthesia, everything gets animated again, and activated. Karma just kicks in, where you, before anesthesia. And that's what deep sleep, susupti, is the time of cosmic annihilation. Living entities are in that state of consciousness. They're still conscious, but their karma is not active.
Can the living entity understand what is going on or nothing like that?
Consciousness is, when you're under anesthesia, you're not conscious of it. You're not aware of anything. Consciousness is there because the spark of life is there. It doesn't go out. It's eternal. But very covered. Deeply covered. Anesthetized. This is our last question. Yeah, for sure.
Lust and love. Love, say, towards other living entities, are also like they're also subservient to time. Like time will destroy.
In the spiritual world, time is conspicuous by its absence, and there is real love. Then in this world, there's the reflection of the real thing, and then yes, time is running the show. Time is moving that, or time is moving our emotions of so-called love. In the spiritual world, there's this nice picture of Krishna and the 8 principal gopis, Radha, Krishna. Everything in the spiritual world is free from material contamination, free from the modes of nature, free from the influence of time, free from the influence of karma. There's nothing material about it. And so there can be, transcendental anything. If there's the mundane feature of anything, there's the transcendental counterpart. In other words, lust and love. But lust, in the mundane sense, is one thing, and lust, in the transcendental sense, is for the pleasure of Krishna's senses only, nothing else. That's the transcendental picture. And it's perfectly appropriate because the gopis, there's expansions of Radharani. I mean, this is a very high subject matter. Let's do anger. In the spiritual world, there's everything. Within Narayana is everything. So Narayana can become angry. And you say, no, you can't be angry. But his anger, he was approached by Brahma. Madhu and Kaitaba, they stole the Vedas, help! So he became angry. Bodhishingade became angry. Transcendental, not the anger that we know, or lust that we know, love that we know. That's the reflection. It's all mixed with living karma and time. Does that answer your question? There's the spiritual counterpart, and then there's what we know. Okay. Prashant?
Sure.